Okay, and with that, let's go ahead and get started, music directors. Woo woo! Yay, so excited. I just have a couple of announcements before Brandon kicks us off. Hi, Brandon. How you doing? Good, awesome. So just a couple of announcements as we go into this. So MTEA conference is happening. It is July 8th through 10th, 2026, or July, oh my gosh, January. Don't come in July, come in January 8th through the 10th, 2026 in San Diego, California. So hope everybody can join us for that. Also, just wanted to remind people that the journal submissions are open right now. So if you have an idea for Coach's Corner or a non peer reviewed article, that deadline is coming up in literally 10 days. But if you have a peer reviewed article, that is at the end of August. So we are looking forward to seeing everybody's journal submissions. It's a great way to do a little tenure boost, which is awesome. And then submissions for the conference in San Diego will be opening soon. So keep an eye out on our social media for when those open so that you can have your presentation or panel at our next conference. If you have any questions, concerns, we're always here. You can reach out social media. You can email me or Rose or all of the people here at MTA. And with that, Brandon, I am going to throw it on over to you. Enjoy.
Thank you, Jessica. And welcome everyone. If you can just give me like 2 minutes, I'm gonna try to set everything up so that this can go fairly seamlessly. Thanks so much. Okay. Can everyone see the PowerPoint clearly? Yeah? Okay, thanks. So hi, my name, as Jessica mentioned, is Brandon Magid. My preferred pronouns are he, him, his. And today we're going to explore how musicianship shows up in undergrad musical theater training and how we might make that learning more visible and potentially more connected across a degree sequence. A little bit about me. This coming year, I will be doing a sabbatical coverage in the music theater program at Indiana University, where I recently finished my doctorate in music education at the end of last year. And previous to graduate studies, I worked as a music director in New York City for about 10 years. And I hope to get to know you all a little better through the course of this evening. Before we dive in, I did share a link in the chat. It's a Dropbox folder with materials referenced in today's session. And perhaps most importantly, it includes a note-taking handout that follows today's structure. So feel free to download that and use it to track ideas. So today I'll be situating today's session around scholarship pertaining to ideas about music theater musicianship pedagogy. And then and so let's kind of outline all of this. I'll then be using strand theory as a guiding framework, a way of thinking about curriculum not just as a series of courses, but as overlapping strands that develop over time, things like sight singing, oral skills, functional keyboard, written theory, and so forth. And we'll move from broader curricular framing to micro level examples, including specific syllabi objectives, to look at how those strands are or aren't woven into the work we ask students to do. There will be a lot of moments for active participation and discussion, which I hope will be the most meaningful part of our time together. And, more than anything, I just want this session to serve as a launch pad where we might like imagine and reimagine how we teach musicianship in ways that are integrated and really grounded in the realities of music theater training. Um, NASM and NAS both mandate musicianship skills and music theater training. NASM specifies that music theater students be able to hear, identify, and work conceptually with elements of music and demonstrate functional keyboard and sight singing ability. And NAS similarly requires basic competence in music theory, sight singing, and piano. And so, despite these really clear standards, few empirical studies assess how well programs meet those requirements. Instead, we have a range of other scholarship. Cowan reviewed two traditional music theory texts and then two music theater specific textbooks. He concluded that these materials do meet NASM competencies, but they often kind of exceed or bypass the practical needs of music theater students. More contemporary textbooks offered pedagogical approaches tailored to the unique performance demands of music theater students. At the time of Cowan's dissertation, neither Riley nor Gurley's textbooks were yet available. While prior texts really kind of applied classical theory instruction to music theater repertoire, Riley, in particular, really urges instructors to move beyond traditional models and instead respond to students whose music experience is, quote, embodied, intuitive, and dramatically motivated, end quote. And she operationalizes that philosophy through like a character driven score analysis of almost every topic in oral and written theory and sight singing, and supported by a wide range of repertoire, including the Golden Age canon, Lin Manuel Miranda, and Stephen Sondheim. For instance, rather than teaching rhythm as just a matter of duration alone, Riley suggested students consider why a character might linger on a note or hold a certain word longer or respond to a change in tempo or articulation. So, kind of linking notational elements to dramatic intent. Hanlon also offered tailored curriculum to music theater students in terms of musicianship, but also went further and really insisted that students rehearse using professional vocabulary with music directors and collaborative pianists, and emphasized the need to work quickly in rehearsal. Hanlon sketched a design with clear objectives, a week by week course outline, and a sample lesson plan, and then small scale exploratory studies include Ozaki, who surveyed faculty at 20 MT music programs and found strong internal accountability despite limited standardization, and Harrison et al., who implemented rubric based continuous assessment at the Queensland Conservatorium. Gerby contributed the most comprehensive empirical work to date. Her dissertation analyzed 41 community college MT curricula and surveyed 34 stakeholders across secondary, post secondary, private, studio, and industry settings. Findings highlighted broad agreement on the importance of voice instruction, music literacy, and production experience, but also revealed a lack of consensus on how to sequence and scaffold these elements. Only one third of respondents believed current 2 year programs adequately prepared students for industry or transfer. And so, in response, Gerby developed a SUNY aligned prototype curriculum designed to support smoother transfer with an emphasis on embedded general education, scaffolded musicianship coursework, and holistic advising, particularly for first generation, low income, and historically marginalized students. So, taken together, current scholarship highlights a need for musicianship pedagogy that not only meets the competencies, including foundations in Western music theory, but also ones that prepare students for practical demands of contemporary commercial music theater. So while the evidence about how music theater musicianship is actually taught actually remains rather limited, the earlier scholarship and textbooks indicated that instruction often applied classical Western music theory models to music theater repertoire, and more recent scholarship and texts emphasize the need for music theater musicianship coursework to also address the practical demands of contemporary commercial theater. These musical demands include dramatic interpretation, quick learning and the ability to communicate and function effectively within fast paced professional rehearsal environments. So, I think the big question is like, where does all of this leave us? And I think there's a real growing agreement that musicianship instruction for music theater students has to move beyond adapting classical theory content to music theater repertoire. But while there is increasing convergence around the need for more integrated performance driven pedagogy, there remains little shared agreement on what benchmarks or sequencing should guide that instruction. Gerby's curriculum offered one scaffolded model. I feel that strand curricular theory might help the field structure and visualize this work across programs. So, strand theory originates from literacy education. In foundational reading research, early reading is described as a process that draws upon multiple interwoven strands, including phonological awareness, decoding, the vocabulary, background knowledge, and comprehension strategies. These strands are likened to threads in a rope, individually distinct but really tightly woven to build strength and fluency, so no single strand is sufficient on its own. Rather than developing in a procedural order, the strands are introduced and reinforced in relation to one another, allowing educators to build sequencing that really reflects developmental interdependence. So, for example, phonemic awareness might be practiced alongside vocabulary and text comprehension. So each strand strengthens the others over time. And then Ruthman and Dillon extended strand theory into music education by arguing that musical understanding develops when strands such as oral fluency, theoretical knowledge, and creative response are cultivated individually and interdependently. So, for example, a student learning to improvise a melody is not just applying theory, they are also drawing on their oral skills to anticipate harmonic changes, using motor coordination to realize those ideas on a given instrument, and relying on creative instinct maybe to shape expressive phrasing. So ultimately, they contended that strands should be taught both individually and in combination through authentic musical acts that reflect how musicians actually perform, interpret, and create. So in music theater, strand theory, I think, offers a compelling framework for supporting students with varied prior experience in areas like keyboard, sight singing, or music theory. And so while these strands are built through targeted instruction, strand theory really encourage professors and instructors to also interweave them through real world music theater tasks. So, like, for example, students may be asked to analyze musical decisions with respect to the melody, accompaniment, or orchestration in terms of character and narrative, helping them to inform their acting approach of a given song. They might be tasked with preparing an audition cut for a class presentation on less than 24 hours notice without any in-class support, kind of reflecting professional expectations of quick preparation. Or maybe they're coached in how to mark scores and communicate effectively with audition pianists and music directors with explicit focus on professional vocabulary. In-class sight reading examples might also move beyond traditional Eurocentric melodies or even solo music theater melodies, and instead assign students specific ensemble parts of sight singing drawn directly from four-part music theater repertoire. These tasks all demand coordination of multiple skills simultaneously and mirror the actual pace and complexity of contemporary commercial music theater. So I thought we could pause here now to sort of examine a couple different examples of strand-based design. So one is going to be macro, which is kind of a curriculum-wide framework. We'll have some discussion, and then we'll look at one micro, like one within a single course. So the macro example draws from social justice music theater ensemble curriculum I designed for students in grades 10 through 12. It was a semester course that students would take more than once, and its structure was informed by both disciplinary and civic goals. So I identified four strands: musicianship, dialogue, embodiment, and devised theater. And these strands were selected to support students' expressive development across musical, theatrical, and social domains. So, musicianship addressed the need for consistent vocal and theoretical training, daily warm ups with attention to vocal technique, sight singing, and song analysis. And the dialogue strand was embedded as a semester long recurring seminar style space for collective inquiry into social justice topics. Embodiment emphasized personal authorship through monologue, scene, and choreography development. And devised theater challenged students to create extended works, often drawing from pre existing source material, and to select and stage a work to perform within a community space. So to arrive at these strands, I considered both the disciplinary demands of music theater and the broader civic and expressive goals of the ensemble. So strand theory helped guide that process rather than organizing the course around siloed units. I identified core modes of engagement that students would need to revisit and ultimately interweave over time. And then each strand was scaffolded with multiple modes of operation and points of entry, as it's reflected in this sort of abridged table. So they were all introduced separately. The strands were designed to reference and reinforce one another like strands of a rope, gaining strength through interconnection. So, for example, as students refine vocal technique, they engage with curated playlists of protest music to analyze how vocal delivery can express resistance. And then these insights were applied into authentic tasks like authoring and staging original scenes that explored injustice or defiance. And then, in turn, these scenes informed ensemble based reimaginings or revisals of canonical works, and allowing students to challenge dominant narratives through performance. And so the strands really work together to support embodied justice centered artistry. And I think this example reminds us that, integration doesn't need to happen all at once or within a single course. In music theater programs, I think there's a tendency to front load foundational theory instruction, and perhaps almost with the intention that later coursework will really connect it to performance. I think strand theory might encourage us to think uh, a little broader than that. Like we might consider where and when the different strands are taught, reinforced, and pulled together. Like, for instance, functional keyboard skills might begin in musicianship, but deepen when students prepare scores for acting class or rehearsal. Dramatic interpretation, of course, might be honed in acting, but can be connected to phrasing and articulation work and sight singing. Communication with accompanists might be introduced in musicianship, but rehearsed in audition technique classes. So designing strand wise helps us scaffold instruction across the degree and helps us to respond to the varied student backgrounds. Not every student is entering with equal skills across all strands. So mapping how we return to them, like when we isolate, when we weave, I think can make our instruction more equitable and holistic. So I thought we would take a second, and if you feel free to either respond to one of these questions, any of these questions, whether through the chat or if you want to just pop on. And I thought we would just maybe take a few minutes. Here are some just reflection questions on some of these ideas about the strands of musicianship, right? Um, where are those strands present in your own course or in your larger curriculum sequence? And maybe are there other broader strands that you might identify that support musicianship development in your context? Like, not thinking really about the strands, not the specific culminating task or detailed sub skills, or where are students asked to like weave those strands together? What kind of like are the real world musical tasks that are happening within your course, or maybe you can think of more broadly across a year of instruction, or even more broadly throughout an entire degree sequence. And do you think that this theory might help clarify sequencing, or do you think it kind of helps to reveal maybe missed opportunities? Great. Okay. I think I'm getting some really affirmative yeses, which is really appreciative. Um I think it might have a lot of potential to be thinking about musicianship within music theater, which is so interdisciplinary. But then the musicianship component is also so specific. And Eve has a great comment here about composing the score within a variety of musical styles, right? I think that that's a reality too, is that even within one score, the vocalism, the genre, the way in which it's sung and the way in which the music communicates is not through one specific language, or one, it's not monolithic. Even within one score, there can be such a variety of musical genres and vocalisms required. Yeah. um Micah, I think that's really compelling, trying to kind of really connect applied voice and musicianship. Because that is, again, we'll talk a little bit, I think, more about the sort of challenges of potential integration of this, but definitely having a space where students are not just sort of, I'm singing for my voice teacher in this one way, and then I'm singing for the music director or the content. It kind of can overlap at times, right? Um, and maybe, I don't know, maybe we can these are, of course, some of the more common texts that I referenced in looking at research, but certainly I think that their more contemporary scholarship is sort of meeting this call for what are the practical demands. Um, and potentially, maybe we can explore here in a little bit if how much further we could even go with that. Yeah, and finding ways to reinforce, absolutely, bringing those strands in, not just keeping the music theory strand or the sight singing strand within the specific music theory course. Where else can that go, and how can that relate? Um, oh, these are so great. Yeah, that's really an so talk about, I think, Christine Riley has that great quote in the textbook about sort of, honoring students whose learning of musicianship happens sort of embodied and dramatically motivated ways. And I can't think of a better example than Eve discussing here about, what kind of emotion and the way the affective response to certain kinds of time signatures, which of course can be a part of the dramatic interpretation strand, can be a part of the way that students learn how to understand and maybe even inform things like character development, whether that happens in musicianship course or in other ones. Absolutely. Oh, those are great. Maybe by the end, we'll also just have a totally different textbook in our heads. Yes, and musical subtext. We're gonna let's actually, that's a good, I think, a good point of pivot, because I'd like to maybe now, thinking we kind of looked at these kind of broad strands, um and now I'd like to now kind of start to see how that would work in a sort of music theater musicianship course, and certainly things like musical subtext in acting is huge. So, okay, I have. I'm gonna use these two, oh, sorry, these two syllabi. Now that we've kind of looked at strand theory more broadly, I thought we could zoom in on how it appears in actual syllabi objectives. So here are two examples. One is from USC's THTE 205, Musicianship for Musical Theater Actors, and then one from a course that I designed at Ohio Northern University, Musicianship for Musical Theater, MUSC 1051. So I'll give you a moment to read through these. These are also, if you want to sort of easier view, these are also available in the Dropbox link. I also want to emphasize like these are meant as perfect models or templates. I think they're real world examples that help us think about how musician strands are or aren't woven into course level goals. And these are kind of interesting. Why? Because both of these courses appear at the exact same point in the degree sequence, right? After students have completed a semester of music theory and piano, before they've had the formal acting studio or significant production experience. So that kind of was speaking to the curricular tendency I mentioned earlier. Um, a few things stand out for me. The USC course really emphasizes ensemble rehearsal and company singing, skills which I think are directly aligned with professional rehearsal expectations. And at Ohio Northern, those same skills surface through a culminating showcase of solo and group work alongside introductory audition practice, things like selecting cuts and communicating with collaborative pianists. Both courses, and I think this was also highlighted in the chat, highlight the role of musical subtext and dramatic interpretation. But interestingly, they emphasize different technical elements. The ONU syllabus breaks sight singing down into very layered skill components, while the USC syllabus offers more specificity around ensemble sound and unification. And of course, if I'll give you another minute if there's anything else that sticks out to you when you're reviewing those two syllabus, feel free to put that in your infographic organizer and we'll come back to that during discussion. So in this visual, each bar represents one course objective. The colored segments within each bar indicate the strands being activated, so you can see which strands are integrated into each task. And that's not as a score or checklist, but just as a way to really make visible what kinds of learning are being prioritized. And you'll notice, I think, that not all objectives touch every strand, and that's okay. I don't, the theory I don't think is necessarily about hitting everything all the time, but just recognizing opportunities to build relationships across skills in ways that serve music understanding and support student development over time. And I think that's really the nugget. So I thought also in considering this, maybe it would be also useful, like we're kind of, I think, in some agreement on its potential impact for music theory, music theater musicianship pedagogy, and potentially maybe are even aware what those musicianship strands are: the sight singing, aural skills, keyboard theory, and interpretive performance. But I think actually integrating them into curriculum presents some challenges. um, I think one, students enter with varying preparation, right? Students come in vastly different musical backgrounds. So some have stronger classical theory, but they don't necessarily have as much aural fluency. Others may be great singers by ear, but don't necessarily have a lot of Western music theory background. So this variability, I think, maybe can present some challenges to coursework design. Um, I think curricula can sometimes be really crowded and dense. Students are juggling acting and voice and dance and general education and rehearsals, and sometimes they're already over 18 credit hours. So its strand integration is a priority. I don't know, it's not always clear where to place it without displacing something else. I think the reality too is that the variability in programs, like sometimes faculty can work in silos, right? They don't necessarily coordinate across disciplines. Music theory might live in one department, piano in another, and rehearsal processes and productions in a third. So without intentional collaboration, strands risk being treated as isolated skills instead of mutually reinforcing ones. Um, and finally, expectations may not be scaffolded. Sometimes I think there's some assumptions that students can do things they haven't necessarily been explicitly taught. Like earlier, I mentioned like preparing like a marked audition cut or sight singing in a mixed meter. So without clearly defined scaffolded expectations across semesters, students may be set up to struggle rather than succeed. And then also, if you want to pop off in the chat, what are some others, or not? Yeah, students entering with varying preparation makes that really challenging. Varying level, absolutely. Oh, yes, finding songs and information literacy. Yeah, I think that's huge, and sort of also, you know, trying to, I think, create or cultivate discernment around critically evaluating repertoire, right? That can also be kind of go hand in hand. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Justin. I think the crowded curricula certainly is makes it hard to think about the ways in which sort of what one person does can, or what one person does within one particular class can connect across. Absolutely. So I thought I would give you a little time just to maybe try this out and share some of the things that this exercise might bring up or bubble up for you during the process. So Um, choose I like one musicianship or maybe like a musicianship adjacent course that you teach. Or if you don't teach either a musicianship or musicianship adjacent course within your program, and maybe jot down some of the key objectives or skills students are expected to demonstrate. And then maybe for each one, try to consider which musicianship strands are activated. So in this next slide, I've kind of like put together like some objectives or tasks. I think sometimes for folks, especially if they are have coming from like a long-standing relationship with professional practice in the industry, sometimes I think folks almost like to kind of reverse engineer it. Like, what is the authentic musical theater musicianship task that pulls things together? So, if the constructing the objective was kind of tricky or wasn't immediately clear, you might try going like the other way around, right? Like thinking about what the task could be. Hmm. Oh, well, that's a great idea, Micah. Yeah, the dramatic interpretation strand is always it, it's tricky. Again, I think as the point was made in the chat, like it's these curricula, they're they're crowded, they're stuffed, and it's trying to hit all the things is tricky, but I don't think that's necessarily has to be the objective, but just thinking through, okay, where how are these strands relating to one another and how can they be pulled together through these sort of real, authentic music theater musicianship. Yeah, Micah. That's great. The mock audition. Love that. So I just have a few kind of guiding questions um as we kind of think through and kind of I don't necessarily I hate to use the word conclusion, but as we kind of just, think about how we might use this to inform future teaching or how this shows up in curricular design or course design. Um, I think this might be like of all of these questions about like kind of going on beyond performance integrates everything. I thought that maybe we could maybe just tackle like one or two of these. Um, One that's kind of always salient to me is where might students be over relying on intuition rather than developed skills? So, what are things that they're not being explicitly developed and instead maybe being assumed? Or are there maybe missed opportunities for more explicit weaving of strands? Or we can flip it, which is like where is this happening? Like is it like there was a lot of great mention within certain intentions of a given professor or instructor. Are there other ways that it's happening within the courses which you teach, courses which you observe? Agreed. Agreed.
I'm just gonna, is it okay if I just unmute myself and talk?
Yeah,
I feel like I'm
absolutely.
like typing, I'm trying to like type so quickly, but it's like
No, go
it's
for
just
it.
silent. No, I really love this and I feel like this is really validating for how I taught this past year because it was my first year teaching and I didn't really know what I was doing and I feel like I was doing this, so yay.
Ah,
But the I think the biggest challenge, which we talked about a little bit, was like when students come in with like zero theory background, and it really is just like how just teach them the letters on the staff and the very very basics of music theory, and then how to do that when they're in the same class with students who are like really thriving with the application. And I don't know,
yeah.
maybe there's a solution with splitting those classes, but like that's a registrar issue. So of just
Yeah.
how do we like combine that and make it a fulfilling course when there are some students who really do need those foundational theory skills. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also tricky often because programs also vary, especially in those foundation musicianship courses, how whether or not a whole music theory cohort is just put in their own course devoted to musicianship. But sometimes, particularly in smaller institutions, I think there's a real trend to just have Music Theory 1 that is open basically to everyone. And that certainly complicates. So I think the question of like, how broad of a net are you really able to cast in a way that's going to really be successful for music theater students, especially in more advanced courses, either in musicianship or within their degree? I think it's an important question for sure. And again, not that we necessarily have control over that, but definitely, I think one of the challenges of thinking through this particular theory in action. Yeah.
And another question I have is like how can we continue the musicianship application throughout the degree program even when the musicianship class is over? Because I've looked at a lot of the NASM like stuff as well for my grad research, and in a lot of programs it looks like the musicianship or the music theory is like it's a freshman sophomore thing and then it's just kind of done. And like how do we continue to apply that throughout the rest of the college experience, even when those classes are not in the semester plan?
Right. Yeah, that's I think
It's rough.
it's rough, and I think my sense is that a lot of um a lot of that comes from like almost like relationships with colleagues who are teaching that class, and then it sort of becomes this I don't know, this kind of nice symbiotic relationship of like, that person's kind of doing that thing. So how can I set that up? And kind of, more discussion in the other way, like this hopefully kind of two-way understanding of what students are being asked to do. Um, I think that that can help a lot. But certainly the idea that that might be formalized into a degree sequence, I think it's really challenging. And then of course, I think we also have to be realistic that music theater, particularly undergraduate level, there's so much training that is being done that is to respond to the professional demands of contemporary commercial music theater that you almost might feel by the time you formalize it that the new thing is already now we need to do this. And so yeah, I think I don't have I hear you, and I don't know that I only offer that I certainly is going to look a little different, but the familiarity on many different levels, more awareness than not just about where musicianship comes in the degree sequence, but
Mhm.
how it might function beyond its class in the whole degree, how it might function more than just as a musicianship class, and how it can serve the entire degree is one way I think strand theory might help us.
Yeah, it definitely that's a good idea about the colleague collaboration, because I can imagine the effectiveness of like if you have a new music director coming in and being like, "Hey, like this is what they're working on right now," and when you're in rehearsal, like if we can tie it in at all, that'd be great. I think that'd be really awesome.
And I think too, like it's just interesting. I also like there's also the role of the music director in collaboration with the voice teachers. Um, there is the relationship with perhaps other music faculty who are teaching some of these other supplementary musicianship courses. Um, Sometimes it's the music director who's kind of doing all of this, right? And in some ways, maybe for some folks, that feels maybe easier to scaffold, right? Because they know what they're going to be teaching next semester specifically. But I don't. I think it's tricky the sort of more people that you are involved with within a department in the music theater program, it becomes challenging. And so I think the idea of kind of zooming out and thinking of just like what is the strand and how is it moving throughout their time, I think it's just an important visualization. And certainly I think where we're at with the conjunction of sort of scholarship and textbooks, I think we're at a place where we we might consider moving more towards some of these other areas to help inform what we're doing and how to move forward. But totally agreed. Like these are all really um really great points, and anyone else feel free to unmute if you're having problems keeping up the chat. Feel free to unmute or turn on your video or whatever you feel comfortable with. um
Hi, my name is Eve, and I can't open my video because the host doesn't allow it, or
that's okay.
something like that. But anyway, I'm a human here. I'm the one writing Mortgage Meltdown, the musical, and I come at it as a curriculum designer. So I'm
Yeah.
coming at it and thinking, we have drama, we have dance, we have music, and how do we pull all that together with the social studies or history, government, finance component of the Mortgage Meltdown around 2008? And as I'm
Mm.
working on that, I'm trying to think how this is this is a Stanford University philosophy. We don't have a lot of performing arts majors, but the idea is to have a lot of performing arts minors. So you go off and be human biology, engineering, economics, whatever you were going to be, but then you have a background in some exposure, at least, to music and dance and stage production or something like that. So I'm working really hard on making sure that the songs sung by the ensemble are simple. Some of them have a range of just less than an octave. One of them, I challenged myself to write two of the four parts using only the notes D, E, and F,
Wow.
just so that everybody could sing or everybody could handle some part of the ensemble as they're rotating through. It's an active ensemble. And I'm really interested in collaborating with any of you to make sure that the lessons that are inherent in that collaboration of the content area and the musicianship and the drama and the dance all work in something that can be rehearsed in 6 or 8 weeks and put on by students. So I just thinking about all that, and I'm really appreciating all the collaboration that you're indicating here.
Yeah. Well, the thing that you just said that I definitely didn't even think about is particularly if you are in like, let's say for instance you're in a 9 through 12 setting and you are teaching musicianship, or maybe you're a music theater course, and how does the strands, how do they even go further than if we're talking about sort of like cross discipline connection, right? Like the social studies connections to music theater, right? Those are so rich, they're so rich that it seems like that would be even a whole nother way to think about just the certainly the nature of a theory like this is fairly expansive. And so thinking, what are the ways that, what are they doing in social studies, and how are they approaching it, and can that sort of, by taking that social studies class, can that inform in some ways what I'm doing or the strands that I'm trying to thread within music theater at the same time? Or
If I could give you an example, Brandon, I put my email, I mean my web address right in there, email and web address, mortmelt.com. You go to mortmelt.com as the website, and then you click on the playlist for the videos that are on YouTube. You'll see some of the videos have lesson plans or links to help inform a social studies teacher at the college or high school level or just general public. So one of them in particular is called I'll Be Gone, You'll Be Gone. And it's actually the closing of an email that sometimes these traders would send to each other when they're asking somebody to bend the rules on what is the interest rate for LIBOR. Well, someone could just use a couple computer, a keyboard and a couple keystrokes, change the interest rate on LIBOR, the London Interbank Overnight Rate. And, that just screwed up a lot of people. So that cavalier attitude, I'll be gone, you'll be gone. I will have resigned and I'll be on my beach in Maui while my boss, gets caught and maybe gets put in jail, which never actually happened. But anyway, When the bankers are singing to each other or the traders are singing to each other, I have them in pretty much interchangeable lines. They don't have individual personalities. The bankers never get named. The score makes it clear that it's just banker number one, banker number two, in whatever sequence they sing. And in one of the links, in one of the videos, I can't remember which one, I put for some background, watch Elizabeth Warren talk to a bunch of bankers on Zoom in the middle of the pandemic crisis, when there was that financial squeeze on all these people who suddenly had no income in the middle of March or April of 2020. And their attitude about returning the overdraft fees was identical across all of them. Well, if the customer asks for it, maybe we can arrange it. No, we're not going to voluntarily refund those fees. Oh, it's just, not very much for each time. Whatever their attitude was, they were singing the same song metaphorically. And I have them in barbershop quartet style singing the same song on the score.
Yeah. Wow.
Micah's got a hand up.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, in regards to like using new music, for some of the like crossover into different disciplines within the music theory classroom. I found myself doing that this past year because we had an artist in residence who was working on a new work, and so getting to bring in some of those compositions, I felt like was a really good equalizer for students. 'Cause thinking about like some students come in and they have like 100 musicals memorized. Some students come in and they've like only listened to one. It's like, how do you come with repertoire for sight singing and make it fair, and like they're all getting challenged. And I felt like new music was a really good tool for that because it was something that none of them had ever seen, and it was also exciting because they were like getting a little sneak peek of like it was fun.
Yeah.
So I feel like that
Well,
could be a good tool.
that's amazing. And also because you could actually potentially, if your focus, let's say that week, is on a specific aspect of this certain kind of rhythm, this kind of meter, or this kind of interval, you could
Yeah,
actually
exactly.
do that, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, and then you can ask, you don't have to ask yourself, oh, we don't know what the composer thinks. You can just go and be like, hey, what did you actually intend with this? And
Yeah. Oh
it's
my
really
Yeah.
gosh.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm curious. I've been putting the songs up on YouTube, and I know some playwrights or composers are very secretive and they don't, or there's copyright issues all over the place. And of course, I want to protect my copyright, but I wanted people to be familiar with it and have a way to go rehearse, because a typical college quarter is maybe 8 weeks of rehearsal time, maybe 6 weeks by the time you do your auditions, and then you're getting ready for your performance, and your performance has to fit within the quarter. How do you
Yeah.
feel about having the the students be able to go to YouTube and practice?
I think that may be a good question for Amanda, the music librarian, who knows a lot about copyright things. Amanda is actually was my music librarian in grad school, so it's very cool to see you here. Hello.
Pressure, Amanda.
I think we are at time. I have so appreciated everyone's responses. Amanda, thank you. Feel free to email me or reach out as you're kind of, especially I think this is like we only have a couple more weeks, and then I think folks are kind of starting to create syllabi. And so when you start thinking of that, feel free or to reference any of the materials mentioned. I just want to thank you so much for clearing some space and time in a very well earned summer vacation for your dedication to professional development. Um, and also for holding space for such an important topic that I think my own preparation for today's session was very revealing, in that there isn't a lot of there isn't a lot out there. So I hope that we'll all kind of this year continue to explore this frontier. Thank you all so much.
Was this
Um,
the subject of your doctoral research, or is this a...
no,
I'm
no,
so curious. It was so well prepared. I was like, oh my gosh.
no, this is
There's no
not.
way. I was like, is this just his like? That's so cool.
No, it's not, but it was really interesting kind of diving in, and I think I think all of the ideas presented today in these really compelling chats and conversations um continue to be really important, and I hope that kind of can serve as a launch pad into exploring this topic um more rigorously and more thoughtfully, and um, I think to probably great benefit to music theater students in all different kinds of settings. Awesome. Okay, I will copy all of this down. Thank you all so much. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.